All right, is this thing on? Oh, hey, Justin here with Stay at Home Dad's podcast. Welcome to the place I talk about a lot of different things that happen in my life with my kids and my family, as well as guy stuff, things I think about, things I'm interested in, trending topics, whatever. I try to bring all those here and I talk about them. So hopefully I talk about things that also interest you. Anyways, thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in with me on this little Christmas Eve episode. Christmas is right around the corner. Well, I hope you're not sick of Dad Classic episodes because I'm going to hit you with another one today. Yay! The holiday season is literally right around the corner, just a couple of days away, and I really want to spend that time with my family instead of in front of my computer or in my walk-in closet, which is also known as my recording studio. So, hey, don't laugh at me too hard about that. It's very great sound quality in here. So my kids are out of school for winter break, and I think I've got them for almost 2 weeks here. That's great news and not so great news. The good will be, yay, we get to hang out for holidays, we get to really bond, we get to open presents together and really spend that quality time and have some fun and go do some adventures and things like that. But I already know that I'm going to be pulling out my already thin hair when my girls don't want to get along, and they want to fight with each other, and they don't want to listen, and you name it, if you've got kids, you know what I'm talking about. So I just know that's the way it's going to go. And the feeding blows my mind. I forget when they're gone and they're eating either the packed lunch we send them to school with or a school lunch, how much food they eat and how much responsibility that is, feeding them 3 meals a day and snacks and everything else. And some days I feel like they could just eat me out of house and home damn near, but yeah, I kind of forget about that. Now, you may remember that I talked to first grade teacher Sharon from a local school here in my community it was probably this summer. I talked to her about keeping kids engaged and learning over the long summer break, mainly so they don't have a backslide in their development and their learning, but also so they just stay freaking busy and not bored and maybe a little bit of out of our hair over that long summer break. Well, today I'm going to replay that episode, part 1 of that episode, because I imagine those tips from summer will actually benefit us here over this winter break as well. It's kind of a similar situation. I will also link part 2 in the description, so if you would like more of that content, Sharon and I's discussion, you can go ahead and just hop into the description and listen to part 2 there. Then next week, between holidays, between Christmas and New Year's, I'm going to put out a new episode. It's going to be kind of an update show. It's going to talk about, how I do things here, kind of where I'm going with this podcast, where I want to go with this show. No real dad and kid advice per se, but it's just to kind of clue you guys in on what I'm doing, where I want to go, and maybe I'll throw a tangent in there too. I imagine I will. I complain a lot. So anyways, if you're interested, stay tuned for that. That'll be next week. And that's it. So thank you for listening. Let's go ahead and get this part 1 of Sharon kicked off here. And I'll talk to you next week. All right. I would just like to welcome Sharon to the show. She's a first grade teacher. She's one of our local elementary school teachers. Actually, my daughter Olivia's teacher from last year. So thank you for coming on my little show here and bestowing a little bit of wisdom upon me.
I'm glad to be here.
Thank you very much. And today I just wanted to have a conversation with you about keeping our kids engaged throughout the summer break so they don't fall behind going into the next school year. And I kind of just thought it would be good to go straight to a source, and you're the only local teacher that I really know. So here we are. All right. The first question I kind of had for you is, how long have you been a teacher, and kind of what grades do you have experience with? A little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I just finished my 20th year of teaching, and I actually came to teaching a little bit later in life. I initially had a degree in journalism, and then I stayed home with my 2 boys. And when they were younger, I just decided I really enjoy working with children. It kind of started with teaching swimming lessons. And so then I went back to school and got my education degree. And my youngest son started first grade, and that was my first year of teaching. So that was kind of fun. So he has gone on to do many things, and I've stayed in first grade. So I've only ever taught first grade. I also have a especially license in reading and in high ability education too. They call those endorsements. So I have an endorsement in reading and high ability education. But I have two boys here, and they were Zionsville Community School lifers. We've lived here 20 plus years, and they went to school here K through 12. And I just really love this school district and the philosophies that they have in education and the community, how they value education. And the kids, my boys did great going into college because they were so set up nicely with all of the AP classes that they offer when they get older into the high school years.
Yeah, that's really what we moved here from Nevada, and that's really what kind of drew us to Zionsville. I mean, we had to come to Indiana anyways for my wife's job, but that's what really drew us to Zionsville was the high level of public education that they offer, and it's something a lot different than the typical public school you get in Las Vegas. My mom and my stepdad are teachers. They were teaching. They've taught for years. I don't know how many, but they were teachers out in Las Vegas, and I would hear essentially horror stories about how certain parents were, how class sizes were so overwhelmed. They have mobiles outside for classrooms. My mom was teaching classes of 40 plus kids in middle school, and she taught middle school, and then she was a librarian for quite a few years. And my stepdad was a Phi Ed teacher in high school, but now they've both long retired. Now they've been retired for a few years. So yeah, it's just an interesting stark contrast between the level of education here in Indiana, which I don't really know why, and versus the level of education in Nevada. It's just quite a stark contrast there.
Right. I feel like here in Zionsville, my boys got a private prep school education through public schools. That's kind of how I feel, because they've been gone, graduated in 2011 and 2014. Every year the classes get bigger and bigger, but and the community is continuing to grow. So it's not going to stay that way. But at least when my boys went through, they didn't go to a humongous high school. We have a nearby high school that's like a small university. They have so many kids that go there. So
yeah, and I've noticed too that I think, is it a Boone County? The county that we're in is Boone County, and they have an extra 1% or 2% tax that goes to schools, so they kind of get some funding there. And Zionsville is really small town. It's a suburb of the big city, but it does have a small town feel. And I grew up in a small town school. I grew up with a graduating class of 92 kids. The town I lived in had 1,900 people in it. So that's a big deal compared to out west in Nevada too, where I think funding is in dire need out there for sure. So
right.
So I had this question, and I've noticed this with my own daughter, and that was, when the year comes to a close, do you notice really any burnout going on with your kids in the aspect of learning or listening? And do you have any kind of recommendations for parents that might help minimize that burnout or increase child's engagement, in class?
Well, the closer that summer gets, you do have summer fever. Even teachers have it too, because you've spent so many days and weeks with the same class, especially at an elementary level. And sometimes they're just ready to move on. So I wouldn't call it burnout. I just think that they're just ready to move on and to have a new environment, a new teacher. And so I with first graders, I don't see burnout at all. The younger kids, that's why I love teaching first grade. They love school, they love each other, they love their teacher. But, kids, just like teachers, they feel like, oh, here comes summer, and the countdown. And I don't know. I even feel like at the end of the year, it's like, okay, they're like little baby birds who are ready to fly off into second grade, right?
Yeah, that was actually another question I had, is if you as a teacher kind of feel any of that kind of stress towards the end of the year, and you're kind of like, oh, I'm ready for a break. Because I know when I used to be in the working field, that I would get burned out and I wouldn't get any kinds of breaks like kids get, and I would feel that same way about doing your same job over and over again and not having, any sort of a break. So it does make sense that kids feel that.
Teaching is a lot, and you know this probably because you said you have relatives in education, but teaching, especially in elementary, I can't talk to middle school and high school because I have never taught that, but teaching is a lot of like rhythm and routine. And, as you do the end of the year, you kind of get out of those rhythms and routines because you've got special things happening. You've got field trips, or you've got,
jogathon or
jogathons or dance marathons and things like that pop up, and then kids get out of their routine a little bit. So because of all those kind of end of the year activities, it does kind of lend itself to that summer fever a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, we've noticed too, like I said with Olivia, that she was in gymnastics from probably last summer until February, March, and then she was in a sewing class, and then she was in school on top of that. And we noticed that her mood kind of tended to decline, and when things started getting a little bit tough in gymnastics and she wasn't able to perform things, or she would injure herself, we noticed that her mood would really change. And we ended up asking her and said, hey, do you still want to do this? Are you still having fun? And she said no. So we pulled her out of gymnastics, and then we eventually pulled her out of sewing too, just because it was the end of the sewing session. And her mood did drastically come around. She was getting very negative there for a while, and she was getting very unwilling to do things. So I think us pulling her out of some of those activities kind of changed that for her, and it helped her out quite a bit.
Kids can be overscheduled for sure. And I learned that lesson as a parent as well. Kids need downtime, just like parents and adults need downtime. I need downtime. And so I think that's great that you listened to her and pulled her out, because you don't want her to have a negative connotation with gymnastics because she got frustrated or she was tired, or because, as a teacher, of course, I'm always going to say your first priority should be education, not soccer or baseball or, horseback riding or whatever the activity is. But, and I want kids to have fun doing those things and do them if they're having fun. But if it's too much, especially during the school year, and they're getting too tired, we in the classroom as teachers will see the results of that.
And it seems like not a new trend, but it does seem trending to get kids into a ton of sports and let my kids do basketball and football and whatever else, and just have them loaded with almost trying to expose them to many, many different things. But I think in the long run, I think it could, like you said, it could kind of deter them from getting a good education in school every day.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the child. I had, like I said, I had two boys, and my oldest is a very high energy, high gross motor skill, and we had to keep him tired. So we did probably overschedule him, but it was
necessary, right?
It was necessary, but my younger son didn't need that. So we didn't have him in as many activities as my older son. So it's kind of a case by case basis.
Right. Kind of play it by ear with each individual child. That makes a lot of sense. So when kids come back to school from summer break, do you notice a significant amount of knowledge loss, or can you kind of tell which kids spent time doing academic refreshing versus the kids that really didn't do that, and how quickly do you kind of notice those differences?
Oh, you can tell right away, because most grade levels talk, or we have sheets when they come in. We know where a student should have been when they ended a kindergarten, if they're coming into first grade, and you kind of expect them to be like, for example, a reading level. You maybe they might drop off one level. But if they've dropped off 2, 3, 4 levels, you can tell that they didn't do much over the summer. I can see it also. I know that's one of your other questions about over breaks, winter break or spring break. I can tell the kids who read or did something academic versus the ones who didn't. So, and I mean, it doesn't take long to fill in those gaps, and each kid is different. Like I said, with my two boys, I had to just like choose your battles over the summer about how much are you going to force them to do, or not force, that's the wrong word, but how much are you going to ask them to do?
Right. Almost force. Sometimes you have to force them. Yeah.
Yeah. I have the one story about my younger son. He, one summer, well, I guess it was after his first grade year going into second grade, we didn't do anything academic. And I just like my boys to be outside. They played outside. They, did outside things. They went to the pool, and they rode their bikes, and they played with friends, and we didn't do anything. And back then, the NWEA test that we put a lot of emphasis on in our school district, they didn't take it until second grade. Now they take it in kindergarten and first and every grade level. But he came back. He was a outstanding first grader, but he came in to second grade, took that fall test, and was all of a sudden a below average second grader. And I was like, whoa, that's my fault. We didn't do anything over the summer. So that was a really good parenting lesson for me. And a teaching lesson, so after that, I really do encourage parents to do something over the summer. And I know you're going to ask me later about what some of those some things are. So
yes.
You want me to address that now?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. It's interesting just to comment on what you said earlier is how you can even notice that there is some learning loss, let's call it, when kids are on shorter breaks. That it's just very interesting to how quickly that happens when there's not that repetition there of school every day, and when they miss a week, right. Say for Thanksgiving or a couple weeks and Christmas, how if a child does nothing, that will kind of start to take hold very quickly.
Well, like I said earlier, the rhythm and routine of education, especially in the younger grades, the rhythm is you're moving forward, and maybe not always as quickly as some kids move faster than others. It's just a developmental thing, but teaching is rhythm and routine. And then when you stop that, sometimes you might slide back a little bit, and then you have to get the rhythm and the routine going again. Right. I know our school district implemented a new break this past year, that February break. We got a whole week off in February.
Right.
And I guess I'm not a fan of that because that break or that time, that learning from winter break until spring break is really a crucial time. And then we took a stop, and once again, we roll back a little bit, and then we have to get going again.
Yeah, I thought that break was kind of odd myself. It was somewhat of a surprise. I didn't realize it was coming up, and my wife told me, "Oh yeah, they have a winter." I don't know what it was called, but I think
February
it was
break.
February. Yeah, I thought I read somewhere they called it Dark Week or something. They made it sound like it was this beneficial thing for children, and I was like, okay, and I didn't really think much of it. But like you just mentioned, it's a week-long backslide. And then, and it comes so quickly after Christmas break, essentially. And then you have a week off, and then a month or so later, you have another week off. So yeah, that makes a good point, that it's just another little hiccup in that learning curve that everyone is on.
Other people must have felt the way I did, because we have it this coming school year. They have it in, but after this school year, they took it back. They took it away again.
Must have been a little 2-year test. Yeah. So we'll go back to normal. And I don't miss that break. I don't need that break in there. I thought it was very odd that it was there. So good. I'm glad it's gone.
I didn't need it either. And with spring testing, and I don't want to emphasize testing because that's not what education isn't about. Kids are not test scores, but they still do take those tests. So that's one more week that teachers lose to prepare kids or get the curriculum or the information to them that they need to take those tests. Some of those higher stake tests, like in 3rd and 4th grade, that they take the I-read that they have to pass, and those kinds of tests. That's kind of more what I'm talking about. We don't have those in 1st grade.
All right. So as a teacher, how much more difficult is it to making your job balancing the different learning levels? So when you get back from summer break and then you have some students that have clearly done things and they're already somewhat excelling, and then you have other students that are a little bit more challenged because they haven't done any refreshing. And how do you kind of balance that, and how do you assist some of those students that have fallen behind?
Yeah. I think in the last 10, 15 years of education, this big push for differentiating within a small classroom, like an elementary classroom, has really been so great. And I know from when I think back from my first year of teaching 20 years ago till now, I mean, I hardly ever did like small groups. I mean, almost everything I did was whole group. And now it's just the opposite. And I love that because we can meet kids where they are using small groups. And it does take, a lot of front loading at the beginning, like teaching kids what to do if you're not in the group or you're not, I'm not hovering over you. And it is tricky with first graders because they're not independent, in the fall,
Right.
until probably around, I don't know, Thanksgiving is when I feel like we kind of hit that sweet spot that, okay, they know our routine and they understand what's expected of them. They're starting to become, most of them, or if not all, have become somewhat readers. So they can follow the directions and try to solve their own problems if they come up if they're not meeting in the small group with me. So pretty much, and I know I'm not the only one that teaches that way. I would say almost every teacher in Zionsville, probably at the elementary, teaches that way. There's very little whole group learning going on in a classroom.
It's
all
longer
differentiated.
that sink or swim kind of mentality of, someone's left behind. And yeah, okay. That makes really good sense. That's really cool. And I've been in your classroom too, and you do have tables broken up into almost little groups already. Is that kind of the purpose of that too?
Yes.
That's really cool.
That was hard, that COVID year that we came back in 2020 and 2021, where we were having to sit like in straight rows with gaps in between, nobody's touching anything. That was so hard. Like I didn't realize until that year what a table teacher I am, because I wasn't allowed to have more than 3 kids at the table. And
right. And then as a teacher, you're not being able to contact and get close to your students and see what they're doing and help, lean over them. And there's this kind of protocol, I suppose, you have to keep in a way.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I do, even in first grade, we do a lot of collaborative learning where like I might give a math group a problem and I'm like, I want you to wrestle with this problem. I don't really necessarily care about the answer. I want to see your thought process. And so a lot of times they are talking together, having great conversations about, well, what, try this or that. No, that didn't get the right answer. Or I got this answer. You got this one. They're not the same. Let's go back. Kids are very capable, even at first grade, of having those kinds of conversations.
Yeah, I've noticed that even my daughter Olivia being in your class over a year, how much she's more outspoken. She's much more, talkative and tells stories and tries to solve little basic problems of things outside and things in the house. And it's just, yeah, they first grader is kind of a first grade is kind of a cool time of year or a time span with a child. That's pretty neat. So.
Yeah, it is, because actually you sometimes literally see the light bulb coming on for them, whether it's with math or reading or like just even their social emotional needs. Like you said, Olivia was a very quiet little girl at the beginning of the year, and she always, she was quiet all the way through, but I did see her blossom and, being able to insert herself into peer groups and not be afraid to share her feelings, whether it was in her small group or in her, in a whole group setting kind of thing. So those are the great first grade teaching moments. And that's why I haven't ever wanted to change grade levels.
That's really cool. That's really admirable. Now, speaking of, you just mentioned reading books and doing math. So what are some other things that kids should be working on throughout the year? Is there any simple activities that parents can kind of do at home to facilitate some sort of fun learning for them over the summer?
Yeah, I think in summer, that's where it should be fun. It shouldn't be like, okay, you've got to sit down, you've got to do your 30 minutes of reading today, because that's no fun when it's bright and sunny out. So
Right.
I always feel like there's, and I'm just a real proponent of kids being outside. I want to make that clear too. And no devices. I think parents should, if I were parenting today and I didn't have this issue, we're talking 20 years ago from my kids, we didn't have all the devices that we have now, but I would have a device-free summer. I mean, just put away, and because they're going to get that. Kids are going to have devices when they get older. But right now, while you can still control that while they're like in elementary school, put those away and just let them have authentic learning opportunities, whether it's, there's lots of different reading you can do. You could read the back of a cereal box, right? Or you could read directions to a board game. That's one thing. I wish kids would play more board games, because there's reading in board games. There's rolling 2 dice and adding those numbers, or maybe even 3 dice. There's math there. I love board games for kids. But there's just so many more authentic type of learning activities that you can be doing as a parent. Just be on the lookout for those. Like, I'll give you the example. A couple of years ago, we were out at recess and we found the coolest, I've never seen a caterpillar like this. It was like green and big and puffy. And we took pictures of it at recess. And then, I think we were supposed to do math when we got inside, but we didn't. We looked up what was that caterpillar. We looked it up and we learned about it. You just have to look for more of those kinds of authentic learning opportunities with your kids, especially if they're at home. And even just like taking their favorite sport, for instance. One of the activities I like to do at school with some of my kids is take your favorite sport and find out how many different ways are you using math in that sport. So like, say you have a boy who's into football, like, okay, you're talking about scores and you're scoring 2 points or 7 points, or or you're like how many yards somebody's gaining, or there's just so, maybe even draw look up and see how many yards is a football field, and just draw it out and do a poster almost on it. So there's just lots of different things. And I know parents take kids out to dinner, like pull out your money. If you have some money in a wallet or in your pocket, have them count up the money, or use the menu to say, okay, well, if I order this and this, how much money am I going to need? Just pose those problems. The one thing as a teacher and as an older parent that just drives me crazy is I go into a restaurant and I see a family of 4 sitting there. Mom and dad are on their phones. Kids each have their iPad. There's no conversation going. I just want to go tap those parents on the shoulder and go, these little people are only going to be little for a short time, and then they're going to be gone. And you're going to have missed it because you were on your phone or they were watching a movie when you could have been having a great little conversation at dinner.
Right. So I 100% agree with that. Like
if you could look for just authentic ways of learning, whatever it is that you're doing. And then I know you probably know with in the fall, we do wonder projects where I let the kids pick something that they're really interested in, and then just find out as much as you can about it. Now, I guess at that point, you may have to have a device or two, but but you can also go to the library and get books too.
That's true. Yeah, yeah. And how often do you hear, speaking of devices and stuff, how often do you hear parents saying, possibly emailing you or even telling you throughout the year that my kids won't listen to me when I tell them to do homework, or I can't get my child engaged, or, whatever excuse you want to use. And I'm not going to lie, I've said those excuses as well. I've used them already probably this summer. So what do you kind of say to those parents like me that have that problem?
Yeah. Like I just said, I think I would just tell you to look instead of like forcing it. At our school, we kind of have this no homework policy. So that's probably not a thing here in our school district, but just like, don't force it. Just like look for things that they're interested in and then try to like branch off from there, whether it's nature or whether it's music or whether it's art. There's just different ways. Like like for instance, your daughter, Olivia, is a wonderful, very talented artist, right? You could use that to have her drawing things using different shapes. And then you're getting like a little geometry in there.
Okay. That makes 100%. Yeah.
Just like
That's
you're
really
kind of just like sneaking it in there without them really knowing that they're learning.
Right. And it's not labeled as, here's a word, to give you an example, we bought, we thought we were doing the right thing. We're like, oh, here's like a summertime gap workbook, but It's already titled the wrong thing. It's called a workbook. So my daughter sees that and she automatically associates, I don't want to do quote unquote learning. I don't want to, sit down and do book work. So that's kind of been the tough part for us. So I like that idea of being able to, using things in nature. And you sent a really comprehensive list at the end of the year, and hopefully other parents, or not parents, but hopefully other teachers have done that as well. That gives us many ideas for, things to keep our child involved with the reading program and counting money, like you said, and counting rocks outside. I don't know. And writing you a letter. I don't know if you got Olivia's letter or not. I hope you did.
Get Olivia's letter. I need to write her back. There are so many different ideas out there, more resources than when my boys were little. I guess I'm telling my age at that point, but like for instance, Pinterest has tons of different ideas, just like STEM projects that you could do. At the end of the year, we did a special first grade bubble day where the kids were exploring bubbles, and it's all so hands-on. You should ask Olivia about it because we made bubbles and you don't need anything. We were actually using our fingers and making like a circle with our thumb and our index finger, and you could blow bubbles through that. So you don't even need anything.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Pretty cheap and pretty exciting for a first grader anyways.
Yeah. So Pinterest is a great resource. There's a site that teachers use a lot, but anybody can get on there. It's not just a teacher's thing. It's called Teachers Pay Teachers. And they have tons and tons of ideas. You just type in what you're looking for, and then they might give you different things ideas, and sometimes you have to pay for them. Some of them are free. But I highly recommend both of those things. But like even let's say you do a trip to the zoo with Olivia. I mean, there's reading there. Like you can read about as you step up to exhibits, have her read.
Right.
Tell me about the polar bear. See what or read the map. That's a great skill to have too. We read a book that I love to do with the kids. It's called Bart's Charts, and Bart has to do the school project, and he just figures out, oh my goodness, I can make all these different types of charts using things, that I do. So he made a chart of his baseball and football cards. He sorted them. He did a chart about, he and his cousins were measuring each other one day to see who was the tallest. So he made a line graph with that. And I mean, there's just so many different things. If you really stop to think about it, that you could make that as a learning opportunity that doesn't feel like learning.
All right, that is it for today's episode of Stay at Home Dad's podcast. I know kind of an abrupt cut there, but really good conversation today, really good ideas, really good perspective. So I hope you enjoyed it. Please make sure to tune in next week to hear the rest of this wonderful conversation. There's a lot more content. There's a lot more great tips that she has in there. So please stay tuned for that. Also, if you have any questions or comments for me or even Sharon, I can relay them to her. reach out to me on my social media. It is linked in the description below, or pop over to podbean.com and you can probably leave a comment there. And if you can't, just go ahead and click that little follow button, and that lets me know that you're listening. Anyways, don't forget to tell your friends and your family and anyone else that you talk to that they can grab this podcast on Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, as well as Spotify. And that's it. And remember, tune in next week for part 2 of Sharon's conversation. So, all right, guys, see you later.